Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Café Noir, a Korean romance from 2009 that stars Shin Ha-kyun, Jung Yu-mi, Moon Jeong-hee, and Lee Sung-min. A music teacher, played by Shin Ha-kyun, has an affair with his student's mother, played by Moon Jeong-hee. He becomes desperate when she decides to end their relationship following the return of her husband, played by Lee Sung-min. After that, our protagonist meets a young woman, played by Jung Yu-mi, who is waiting for her lover on a bridge, and he begins to see her every day and falls for her. Okay, there are a few important observations that need to be made before I review Café Noir. First of all, this could be classified as an art house movie, with its non-mainstream style and theater release schedule that hit the film festivals hard, despite failing to gain much traction at the Korean box office. And the professional critics seem to enjoy it, though. Second of all, this was directed by a film critic himself, a well-regarded critic turned director, Jung Sung-il. And then finally, this has a massive runtime of over 3 hours. Okay, so it's over 3 hours long, and it's an art house movie. All right, so you gotta start with this up front. Now, the story is basically split into two halves, each dealing with a separate romantic relationship involving our leading man. And remember, the lead actor here, Shin Ha-kyun, has been in a bunch of stuff over the years, and I'm sure you're familiar with him. And so he's a nice character to kind of revolve everything around. The story is a little bit confusing at times, if only because it jumps around to a lot of different characters, like side characters, along with our main character, and you're not sure how they all connect at first. Two women even have the same first name. So, multiple viewings, I think, are likely needed to understand all the details that happen. But I think that the lack of, exposition for character introductions does keep your mind working in anticipation. Because a character will just show up, and you're like, who is this? You know what I mean? You have to wait a few minutes, a little while, to finally, draw the connections as to what's going on. Now, at the same time, however, the script does rely heavily on dialogue between the characters and communication between them. And this results in some of the most memorable moments in the film. At one point, there's an underwater sign language scene, which is pretty great. There's a storytelling scene during the second half, and a dance scene near the end. And those are kind of the scenes that really stand out in my mind. But one of the problems with Café Noir is that the 3-hour runtime does put a lot of pressure on the writing to continually be interesting. And as a consequence, there are some, I guess you could say, less impressive little stretches of time throughout the film. Little pockets. And this is, I think, more noticeable during the first half of the movie. And the movie begins with a girl eating a hamburger for 4 minutes. All right, 4 consecutive minutes of a girl just eating a hamburger. So, yeah, when I first saw this movie and it started that way, I was just like, this movie's going to be terrible. But thankfully, it's just one of those things you got to deal with in a film like this. There's also a few scenes that I feel are drawn out a little bit longer than they need to be. So, yeah, there are a few moments where you kind of want the story to pick up the pace a little bit, and that might be a problem for some viewers who want to immediately engage with the film. But if you decide to watch this, all right, and let's say you're having a little bit of trouble connecting with the film early on, I think the key turning point is the scene where Shin Ha-kyun talks with Lee Sung-min at the house. And it's a pretty great scene because there's an element of black humor in there, an element of dramatic intensity. Some of the camera shots are really neat, and it's one of the most interesting exchanges of dialogue in the entire film, with some of the best acting. So if you could kind of make it to that scene, you might get hooked to watch the rest. And I think the second half of Café Noir is better than the first half, primarily because that's when Jung Yu-mi shows up and helps to kind of elevate the film even further. I think this may have been the film that made me a fan of hers all those years ago. And it's a good showcase for her talents, definitely. Now, in terms of style, it's beautifully shot and framed. It captures the city of Seoul quite well. So if you want a Seoul travelogue type of movie, this is an option for you. Lots of big wide shots of cityscapes as well as specific locations and areas. Most interestingly, the opening credits show up at the midpoint of the film, which it's always a fun thing at times because they'll show up and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. The opening credits didn't roll yet. And also the color palette switches from color to black and white at times. So I think Café Noir, it's a little bit of a risky viewing option, but remember, if you're into like the art house style films, I think it's a really interesting movie, despite maybe some of its pacing issues. Definitely recommendable if you're that type of a person, but know what you're getting into before watching it. It has some pretty great individual moments as well. Now, it's currently available on YouTube with subtitles, so you might want to check it out if you get a chance. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.